Have you ever been to a town, village, truck stop, gas station, diner, etc. during a road trip that just didn't feel right? Like time seemed to pass differently there, or the people there gave you the creeps. What was your experience? Story 1. I was on a road trip on the South Island of New Zealand, and one night at around 9 p.m. decided to stop in a small town to get some rest. Already while driving into the town, I noticed that there were Christmas decorations everywhere, like decorated trees and plastic Santas, reindeer, etc. Excessive amounts of decorations on the streets and in every window. This wouldn't have been too weird if it hadn't been in the middle of August, but I thought the town was just really dedicated to a specific aesthetic or whatever. I got to the motel and checked in, and the old lady at the front desk was short and rude with me, which I thought was weird because I had experienced people in New Zealand as really nice and quite chatty compared to where I come from. She also wouldn't give me the Wi-Fi password, even though they advertised free Wi-Fi. She quite literally told me to pee off and let her get back to her newspaper. After that, I went out, and the whole time I was there, I never saw any people in the street. I went to a diner near the motel, both also stuffed with Christmas decorations, and had the same experience with the waitress while ordering. She told me they're out of almost everything, and the only thing I was able to get was a cheese sandwich. There were other people in the restaurant who were all eating what I suppose were meals from the menu. They didn't have to order a plain cheese sandwich. While waiting for my food, I noticed that no one in the whole diner was talking, even though there were families and other groups of people. Even the kids ate in silence, or not really silence, as there was Christmas music blaring. After I was done eating, I just paid and left. I was also the only one leaving. No one in that diner, the whole time I was there, got up to leave or go to the bathroom or do anything really. They all just sat there. When I left, I felt like they were all starting holes in my back. The whole time I was in that town, I got a feeling that everyone wanted me to leave and like they were somehow angry with me. This was 4 years ago, and to be honest, I don't remember anything after leaving the diner. I don't remember going back to the motel or going to sleep, and just barely remember being on the road early the next morning. I told some of my New Zealand friends this story because I thought it was some kind of weird theme town, but none of them have ever heard of it, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of that town or how I found it. Story 2. My boyfriend and I had to stay in Melbourne for a few nights. First Airbnb was practically a small hotel room, so all good. The second, on the other hand, it was advertised as flexible check-in, but the owner wouldn't stop pestering us for a time we were going to be there. We told them 8 p.m., and they still kept asking before saying they had to go out and Frank would let us in. We had no mention of this guy before then, but fine, whatever. We ended up missing a few small shows we were eager to go to so we'd get there earlier, and despite being promised off-the-street parking, we could only park on the street. It sucked, but no big deal. We'd had a long day and were pretty tired. Then we got to the house. Frank is this tall, thin, muscled older guy, really intense, and absolutely no chill. Bulging eyes are kind of intense. We were both really uncomfortable from the start, but my boyfriend makes small talk, jokes about Sydney versus Melbourne. This guy doesn't like it, to the point where he stopped walking, swung around, and got in my boyfriend's face. Boyfriend de-escalated the situation real quick, and we got to our room and immediately locked the door. We both got some bad vibes off the place, and the guy, but we couldn't work out why. We thought we were just tired, but kept debating the pros and cons of staying, and the room wasn't helping. It was freshly painted, and the fumes were so strong I was getting a migraine. There was a door to the backyard that was blocked off with a dresser. So much dust under the bed, it was ridiculous. And then we noticed two things. One was the wooden plank holding up the curtains. It was a big, thick, heavy-looking thing, and it was held onto the wall by a nail on each side. Half of it had already leaned right off the wall, leaving a huge gap. This was right above the head of the bed. That was it for my boyfriend. He wanted out. This second point was my big thing. The door to the rest of the house had a lock, but there was also a gap between it and the floor. I'm not talking about a small space for air. I'm not talking about a finger underneath. I'm talking big enough for tall, muscly, big Frank guy to fit his entire arm under. We grabbed our things and snuck out. Went to the nearest grocery store for supplies, shopped around for a place to stay, let Airbnb know we left, and ended up driving through the night back to NSW and slept in the car for a few hours. Nothing exciting happened, but we just really didn't feel safe there. My boyfriend hikes a lot overseas, stays in random and or deserted places. He's not put off easily. We were both pretty glad for a solid reason to leave. Story 3. I had the reverse sort of experience at my local supermarket. I live in Australia and we have right-hand drive cars. I'm just finishing my shop when a huge American-looking SUV pulls awkwardly into the car park, and it's clearly left-hand drive and maybe 10 years old. I like cars, so I'm curious about it, and that's when I noticed it's got US plates on it. Now, these aren't some novelty or limited edition Aussie plates that look American. These seem to be genuine US plates. They had a state on them. Can't remember which one, but it was like Michigan or something. Obviously American. Middle-aged woman gets out, looking like it's a normal day at the shops. So far, the story is a bit weird, but nothing too unusual. But as I take my trolley back to the trolley bay, she's there and having obvious problems working out how to unlock one. You have to put a coin in them, and she's clearly having troubles. So I ask if I can help. She's trying to put what I later find out is a quarter in the trolley, saying she's never seen this sort of thing before. I show her the dollar coin I've just gotten back from my trolley. It's gold-colored, and she genuinely is weirded out by the color and is incredulous when I tell her it's $1. I feel like I'm an alien showing her a new type of cat or something. I put my dollar in the trolley lock and opened it for her because she's clearly lost and I wanted to be helpful. She then sort of gets into a, "Oh, I know this" interaction and says, "Let me give you some money," and opens her purse. It's all American notes. Trust me, there's no good old Aussie plastic multicolored Monopoly money in this thing. I sort of blurted out, "Do you not have Australian money yet?" Thinking that's going to slow you down in the Aldi they love. Her reply was, "No, why would I?" And she gave me the quarter she was trying to put in the trolley. I tell her it's not necessary, but she thanks me in her wonderful American accent and wanders off into the shop. It was hilarious and weird. If you'd shown me a portal from my shops to Michigan that she'd blundered through, it would have made complete sense. I got the impression she had almost no idea she was in another country. She was acting like I was the weird one, but she also spoke perfectly and was really nice, so it's not like she was in any obvious mental health episode. The fact I have the quarter is the only reason I don't think I've hallucinated the whole thing after eating a dodgy pizza. Friends think her husband had gotten a job in Australia and just got the car and everything, etc. shipped over, and maybe she's never been overseas before. It was super weird, and I love that woman so much, I wish I could find her again to see what she's doing now. I've also been into a country town where literally everyone we saw for the half hour we were there looked like they were from the same family, and everyone stared at us like they knew we were from out of town. But that has a very logical but no less creepy explanation. Story 4. I used to live in southern Africa, and we did charity work in a lot of very remote rural areas. And when I say remote, I mean several hours of rough driving on roads that can barely be called roads. Many times we would come across settlements that were not on any map, just a collection of cinder block and mud houses, sometimes well off the road. Usually these were what we called working villages, as in there's some work site, maybe a small brickwork or farm or something like that nearby. Though when I say near, the workers could be walking an hour or so to where they need to be. When we would stumble upon places like this, we would stop, find coordinates and landmarks, make some records, and pass it along back to our office. One day we were working in the area near the borders of South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, and we saw some smoke well off the road. Thinking it may be a village, we decided to go off-road to take a look. It was fairly well hidden, behind a small hill, and from the road you would have never known it was there if it were not for the column of smoke on the horizon. We get to it, and sure enough, it looks like one of these unmarked working villages, maybe 10 or so huts, but something seemed very off. It took a second, and we realized that there was no one around, and yet it seemed as if whoever lived there was there only moments before. We head to where the smoke came from, and it was a large bonfire. When we looked closer, we noticed bones in it. goat and cattle bones. Other than the sound of the fire, there was not a peep from anything else. Once I stepped out of the truck to get a closer look, I had this overwhelming sense that I was being watched from afar, and that I was not welcome there. The other guys in the truck said they felt the same, and that we needed to go, so we did. A couple of weeks later, when we were driving back, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided I wanted to check the site again. This time, however, the village was stripped bare. Anything that could be taken was gone. All that was left was the shells of the huts and a black patch of ash where the fire was. There was one thing that was still there, though, the sense of being watched. We didn't stay any longer and never went back. You were being watched. They saw your vehicle coming and cleared out and hid. Don't know what they were up to or why they were entrusting, but I feel confident that's the case. Story 5. My girlfriend and I went to an Airbnb in a town called Tiger, Georgia, to see a bunch of her old college friends. There was one other couple who got there about the same time we did. By day, the cabin looks pleasant enough. 3 stories of rustic comfort with a hot tub overlooking the forest and sunrise. We didn't get there by day. We got there as the sun was sinking low. Rooms seemed to shrink and tighten. The stairwells were only as wide as a single body, and at the bottom of the basement stairs, a rug hid a padlocked trapdoor. It felt like the start of a horror movie. We were trying to ignore the weird vibes and decide to go to dinner. We spent nearly an hour driving around searching for a place to eat. Steakhouses closed by 7 p.m., an Italian joint, which was now someone's house, a Mexican eatery now abandoned and overgrown with vines. Finally, we found something. It's suitably called the last dive bar on Earth, and it's sitting on the edge of a retention pond. The parking lot is full of pickup trucks, all festooned with old political bumper stickers from the late 90s and early 2000s. We head in. It's like we've entered another decade. But the beer is good, they have pizza, and the prices aren't bad. We eat in a hurry and get out of there. As we get back to the cabin, the other couples are there and talking about how they had such a nice time in town. It was only by daylight at the end of the weekend that, as we descended the mountain, we found a ton of local shops and restaurants that I swear to freaking God were not there the first night. On the first night, the electrical outlets in the house fried my phone, leaving me with no way to contact the outside world. The weekend ended up being nice, but the entire time, we all felt like we had fallen through a crack into somewhen else. Story 6. This is my girlfriend's story, but it's kind of up the alley of what you're asking for. My partner went to Florida with her family when she was younger, and they were driving around trying to find some food until they found a Chinese restaurant, and they went in and had some food. There were no other customers, lots of staff, everyone seemed very tense, but the food was great. They left and had a lovely rest of their day. During breakfast the next morning, they turned on their telly and the news showed the place they had eaten at, and they were like, wow, look, we went there. Then the story started, and it turns out no more than 10 minutes after they left, there was a massive shoot-up, and nobody survived. Turns out that the ignorant British tourists just sat in between some kind of Asian turf war. This happened at a local restaurant in Brighton. There were these dudes who came in, and when my coworker went to the bathroom, one of them followed him to the bathroom, gave my coworker a 50-pound bill, told him to leave, say nothing, or he would be caught in the middle. Of course, they hightailed it out of there, and the next time they pass, the guy at the counter has a bandage in his arm and a black eye. I guess most organized crime like the Yakuza or Triad doesn't want to involve civilians because that brings in the police. Story 7. Yep, stopped in a no-name town in Texas for gas. Bunch of guys wearing nothing but denim hanging out in front of the gas station. Denim, cowboy hats, cowboy boots. It wasn't just a lot of people. Everyone was wearing that. Their drawls were so thick I could barely understand what they were saying to one another. A lot of hootin' and hollerin'. About 50 yards away, there was a guy sitting under a tree. He was wearing a black and white striped jumpsuit and was chained to the tree by a shackle on his leg. Didn't see any law enforcement around. Maybe they dropped him off. A girl with huge breasts, 1.5 arms, and an eye patch complimented my car and smiled at me when I was pumping gas. I saw a cow trotting down the side of the road. No one seemed to be chasing it. The fact it was twilight seemed to make everything surreal. I removed myself from that place as quickly as I could. Story 8. Coatesville, Pennsylvania. I was with a friend who had come up from Mexico, and we were staying a few nights at his grandmother's ranch nearby. Coatesville was the only town around where we could find Mexican ingredients. This is an old steel town that feels post-apocalyptic. Everyone there didn't really seem to be doing anything or going anywhere. It was so creepy. The store we ended up going to had nearly empty shelves, and I think the guys were a bit surprised to see us there. All in all, just very strange and eerie. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.